Good afternoon. This is Ashley Bowers with TTI Performance Systems. Welcome to Stop Letting Emotions Run Your Organization. Today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence and the impact that it's having on organizations, on productivity, and some tips and tricks as to go about managing the emotions in the workplace and making sure that people understand how they're emotionally impacting others in the organization and how they can change the way that they approach emotionally charged situations or even just think about emotions in the workplace. For today's webinar, if you'd like to make comments or ask questions via Twitter, please use hashtag TTIEQ. You're also welcome to use the question panel on your GoToMeeting control panel to ask us questions throughout the broadcast. And periodically we'll be doing a couple of different polls as we work through the content this afternoon. I'm sure we can all relate with this picture. Everyone's had a bad day. Everyone's handled a situation differently than maybe what they should have. And we always say, hindsight is 20/20. And if you were able to go back and redo a specific situation, a lot of times we would have done it better the second time. But that's okay. We need to understand that every single person is going to have a bad day, and every single person out there is going to react to situations differently. They're going to have a different emotional reaction, a different behavioral interaction, and a different motivational interaction with each and every situation that comes to play within the workplace. And we need to allow ourselves to have those emotions and not try to over-control the way we're feeling about a given situation. However, we need to manage the impact that we let those emotions have on our daily productivity and our daily routines and the things that we really need to accomplish, as well as the other people that we work with on a daily or weekly basis. 90% of the difference between star performers and average performers in senior leadership positions is EQ. And this was a study done by Daniel Goleman, who is really one of the founders of emotional intelligence and probably the most recognized emotional intelligence expert. People can have all the other aspects of a superior performer. And if they're lacking the ability to manage their emotions and truly understand what's happening inside their body when they're in an emotionally charged situation, whether it be a positive emotion or a negative, it is going to impact their performance. They have to be able to recognize what's happening, start to regulate what's happening, and then move forward in a positive and productive way, or simply take an emotional timeout. When we look at TTI's dimensions of superior performance, you'll notice that emotional intelligence is in the center of our performance wheel. It's really part of the core of what a human brings to the workplace or to any given interaction. As we look through the wheel, you see things like intelligence, motivators, education and training, experience, personal skills or competencies, acumen, and then on the outside you see the behavior. You can see by the green star the areas that TTI measures versus by the gray triangle the areas that TTI acknowledges. When we have a superior performer who is matched to a job behaviorally, by their personal skills, by their motivators, and then they have the right education, training, and experience to go along with the job requirements, we will sometimes still find a person who's not performing the job or has more bad days than they do good days. Oftentimes when we see that, we'll find that what area that they're lacking in is the ability to manage their emotions. They potentially have a lower emotional intelligence overall, but more importantly, they're unaware of the fact that they have a lower emotional intelligence. They're unaware of how their emotions impact their decision making, their productivity, and overall their performance in the organization. Just bringing about this awareness can dramatically increase a person's ability to manage their emotions in the workplace and therefore outperform their previous standards. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to uncover what is EQ, or emotional intelligence. We're going to get into a little bit of basic theory behind EQ and TTI's assessment on EQ. And then we're going to give you some practical applications of putting EQ to work inside your organization. We want to make sure that you leave this today being able to start to build a language around EQ and to be able to have conversations about this soft stuff we refer to as emotions in the workplace. So with that, we'll get started. The first thing we want to talk to you about are emotional triggers. Every person has a variety of emotional triggers, and they can come in the form of happy things. They can come in the form of negative things. And what's unique about emotional triggers is that they're different for everybody. Two people can look at an identical picture, read an identical email, be in an identical meeting, and have completely different reactions emotionally to what transpired. And so each individual really needs to determine what are their own emotional triggers. Oftentimes, for those of us that have children, we may have a piece of artwork that they did when they were in elementary school, or maybe they left us a voicemail at one point on our phones, wrote us a handcrafted note, or something that really was emotionally touching and meant a lot as a parent. That's something that can be a positive emotional trigger for you. If you're in a meeting or you're in a situation where you start to feel your emotions heighten, and you know that you're not going to be able to necessarily manage those emotions throughout the process, taking a glance at one of those pictures, stepping out and listening to the voicemail, allowing yourself to go back to, what we like to refer to as kind of that happy place, getting yourself back to a place where you can make a decision using your full capacity. So to explore some emotional triggers, we're going to go through a series of pictures. And I'm going to leave each picture up on your screen for about 3 seconds. As we go through those pictures, I want you to think about how you feel. Towards the end of the series, we'll pop up a poll for about 30 seconds to allow you to respond to how you felt when you looked at the picture. So here starts the first picture. And here's your first poll question. Give you about 30 seconds to respond to the poll. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close that poll. 75% of the viewers said that that picture made them feel happy. 13% of the viewers said that picture made them feel joy. 13% of the viewers said that picture made them feel sad. Now, those of you that said happy or joy, you may be looking at that and saying sad. Why would somebody feel sad by looking at that picture? That's a part of emotional intelligence, is understanding that everybody views the world differently and has a different emotional reaction. As a parent, when I see this picture, it actually makes me feel fearful because there's so many studies of all the dirtiness that goes on inside these play places, and all I do is picture my 5-year-old sliding through that. And it makes me fearful of what diseases he could catch and what's really on him after he comes out of one of these things. That's my emotional reaction to this. And by the poll, others are obviously having some type of emotional reaction that isn't what we would generally expect. With that, we're going to go to the next picture. And to your next poll question. 30 seconds to respond to the poll. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. To this picture, 76% of you said you were happy, 18% said joy, and 6% said fearful. And so as you can imagine, when you're looking at a picture like this, some people may have been recently divorced. Some people may be getting ready to propose, and there's some fear going on. Some people may have just lost a long-term spouse. And some people may have just gotten married, or they're very blissfully married and happy, and so they have the different emotions. Again, on the surface, you see somebody on their wedding day, very happy, in love, but different people are going to have different reactions to something as simple as this. So imagine the different reactions when you send a curt email, or maybe get explosive in a meeting, slam your hands down on a counter. Different reactions that can happen in the workplace that are much more intense. What kind of reaction would individuals have to those? Let's take a look at one more picture. And your final poll question. 30 seconds to respond. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. 63% happy, 32% joy, 5% fearful. Again, people may be fearful of water. Maybe they can't swim. Maybe they've had a shark attack. I mean, you never know the history of the people that you're interacting with in customer situations, in prospective client situations, and sometimes even in your organizations, depending on how large or how small, or how long the employees have all been together as a team. So in any given situation, the first key to really utilizing emotional intelligence is understanding and anticipating how you're going to react to a situation. And then secondly, understanding and anticipating how others may react to that situation, knowing full well that it's probably not the exact same way that you will. When we think about EQ, I want you to think about the word change. Change is critical when really discussing emotional intelligence, because essentially, anytime change occurs, a human being needs to be able to employ their emotional intelligence. And that change can be as minor as somebody cutting them off in traffic, to an organization being acquired by a competitor. And so just depending on the person's level of emotional intelligence, their behavioral style, and their motivators, they're going to react differently to different levels of change. When we're in certification classes on EQ, we always start out with the video Social Media Revolution. And we always find the latest version from YouTube. And it goes through all different changes that have occurred over the last 20 to 30 years, depending on which version you download. And it talks about the changes that are going to occur over the next 3 to 5 years, again, depending on which version. But every single second of that video is illustrating change and the speed of change today versus what it was years ago. Therefore, the importance for somebody to be able to manage their emotions when they're responding and reacting to those changes. Again, somebody cutting you off in traffic or an acquisition. It really doesn't matter how minor or how major, it's how you anticipate those changes and how you respond to them. Do you let them ruin your whole day, or can you quickly recover? It's estimated that one negative event can actually throw your day off for 4 hours. So the faster you can recover from that negative event, the higher your EQ. EQ is physiological. It's really the endorphins and everything that's released into your body when change occurs. And all of that goes through your body, which eventually is going to affect your cognition, then your behaviors, then the competencies that you display in the workplace. And all of that combined ultimately affects your decision making, which can either enhance or detract from your performance. The definition from Cooper on emotional intelligence is the ability to sense, understand, and effectively apply the power and acumen of emotions to facilitate high levels of collaboration and productivity. Oftentimes people think, oh no, I'm going to go through an EQ training. They're going to teach me how to control my emotion. Having high EQ is not about controlling your emotion. In fact, we stay away from the word control when looking at EQ. It's really about managing the effects of your emotion. It's about understanding where you are at the current state, being able to regulate what you're going to do with that, and being able to anticipate how others may respond, and therefore adapt how you're going to communicate with those other people. That's really what EQ is about. Going through EQ training and developing your EQ doesn't mean that you're never going to get angry again. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have excited and happy emotions. It simply means that as you go through that emotional process, you are going to be able to go back to a state where your emotions are not running your decisions faster, where you're thinking with what we call a clear head, and you're able to move through the process in a logical manner instead of an emotional manner. Let's take just a few moments and talk about the 5 dimensions of EQ. We really look at 5 areas whenever we do an assessment on somebody to look at their emotional intelligence, and they're really building blocks as we look at the different dimensions. You develop one, then the next one, and so on. And so the first dimension that we look at, or the first building block, is self-awareness. Do you understand yourself? Are you able to know when you're having a physiological response to a given situation? The second is self-regulation. Are you able to regulate how you're responding in a given situation? Can you manage the outward response process to the emotionally charged event? Next, we're going to look at motivation, and truly your motivation. Are you someone who just, regardless of any kind of situation or what's going on, you're out of bed every morning and you're ready to go with no return? Or are you somebody who kind of needs that carrot in front of them in order to get them going in the morning? The fourth one is empathy. And as it relates to EQ, empathy is really the ability to understand how something is going to emotionally impact another individual. How are they going to respond to that picture of a child sliding down the tube? How are they going to respond to the water picture? How are they going to respond to the wedding picture? What is going to be their emotional response? And then social skills is really what you do with that understanding. How do you adapt the way you communicate with people based on how they may respond from an emotional perspective? We're going to go through each of these 5 dimensions, and we're going to talk a little bit about the business outcomes for each of them. Self-awareness. There's 4 different business outcomes up on your screen, but it's really the ability to recognize and understand your moods and emotions. Okay, what's happening with me? Why are you feeling this way? What is it doing? Is it holding you back? Is it propelling you forward? A lot of times people will have some type of physical response when emotions are starting to somewhat get the best of them. And again, this can be a positive emotion or a negative emotion. It can be something great, like someone just got engaged, somebody just landed a big deal, or it can be something negative. You just lost a number one customer, or something on the personal side that's of a negative nature. Looking for the physiological response is the first key to really increasing your self-awareness. For example, you may get a tingle behind your knees or in the crease of your elbows. Some people get red blotches on their body. Some people just, a temperature in general just goes up. Some people tend to tap their foot a little bit. Just about everyone out there is going to have some type of physical response when emotions are starting to heighten within their body, because those hormones have been released inside your body and it's causing your body to change. It's causing something to happen with inside your body's chemistry that's going to cause an outward physiological response. So what I'd like you to do over the next couple of days is, as you have emotionally charged situations, again, positive or negative, try to write down some of those physical changes that are happening with your body. Do you get butterflies in your stomach? What happens in your body to say, hey, my emotions are heightened and I need to kick in my self-regulation? Self-regulation is really going to take a look at what you do with that information of the body is changing. Okay? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to fly off the handle and yell and scream? Are you going to step out of the room and excuse yourself? Or can you understand that you've had a physiological change inside your body, that your emotions are now dictating your decisions, and therefore maybe you need to take an emotional timeout. You need to listen to that voicemail. You need to go into those emotional triggers that would be enablers to get you back into that clear state in order to make better decisions. Overall, people who have higher self-regulation are able to take more responsibility for their performance. They're able to keep the emotional disruptions at bay. Now again, we're not controlling that emotion. We're not saying I don't get angry, or that you don't get overly excited or surprised or fearful or any of those other emotions. We're simply saying we don't allow those emotions to negatively impact our decision-making ability and therefore our performance in the workplace. Some of the things you can do to help yourself self-regulate is to really identify some emotional enablers that can bring your emotional state back down to neutral. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar here, that can be a voicemail. It can be an email from a client. We recommend here at TTI for people to keep a folder in their email of compliments from our customers. And so if they have a bad call with a customer, or they have a situation where they're needing to self-regulate and they're needing to get back to that clear state, we can simply have them read through some of those compliments that they've received from customers. That in of itself will start to calm those emotions back to a place where they can be making better decisions. The third piece is motivation. From a motivation standpoint, this is really looking at, does somebody automatically, get out of bed every day and go at the world with all that they have? Or do they need that carrot? Do they need to have a return on investment? Does it need to satisfy a thirst for knowledge? What's really their reason that they are striving towards excellence? Okay, why are they ready to seize every opportunity? Somebody who's high in the motivation area of EQ doesn't need as much of that external motivation or satisfaction. They get that more internally. And again, you would want to make sure that those external satisfactions are aligned with the job so that you have the job fit through our job matching process. This is more of an internal motivation to move things forward. The fourth area is empathy. Again, empathy from an EQ perspective is really the ability to anticipate the feelings and the reactions from an emotional perspective that others are going to have to any situation. One of the best things to do to start to build on your empathy from an EQ perspective is to look at emails from a different perspective before you send them. You've written your draft email. Read it from a perspective that you wouldn't normally look at it from. If you're a customer service manager, think about it from the customer standpoint. Think about it from, the leadership standpoint of the organization. Think about it from the receptionist standpoint of the organization. Try to think about things other than your exact audience, because then you'll start to pull in some other perspectives and other emotions that may be sparked by reading that same email. If you're a customer service manager and you're used to communicating with customer service people, we tend to get a little biased as to how they want to be communicated with. And we tend to think, I have a great relationship with my direct reports, so they'll understand this just the way I've intended. And that's really not the case. But if you're someone who has a hard time understanding how other people may respond to your information or to given different situations, it's best to think about how people outside of your normal communication circle will react to that type of communication. And the fifth area, and then we'll go to some questions, would be social skills. The social skills is what you're going to do with the information that you've gathered based on your empathy. So when you're utilizing empathy, you can understand how somebody may react to a given situation. The social skills are going to be what you do with that information. Do you change the way in which you communicate? Do you alter that email? Can you listen openly and make sure that you are communicating in a convincing and reassuring way that's not heightening those emotions? It's not putting people in a place where their emotions are heightened and therefore they cannot make decisions in a logical way. And therefore that would impact their performance in a negative way. Making sure to really have that safe place for people to have discussions that are emotionally charged. They are going to happen in the workplace each and every day. But providing a safe place where people understand that they can take an emotional timeout. They're allowed to excuse themselves from the situation and come back later in order to have the discussion, and not forcing the hand for decisions or a response, especially when dealing with your direct reports. People with higher social skills tend to be a lot more inspiring. They tend to be able to initiate and manage change at a higher level within their organizations because they anticipate the reaction of everyone around them, and then they build a plan that's going to help put most of that group at ease. It's never going to put 100% of people at ease. But if you at least anticipate that there will be an emotional reaction from a subgroup of your employees, you can then properly handle that subgroup and they feel safe coming to you. With that, we'll stop for a moment because I know we have a couple questions coming in through Twitter as well as the GoToMeeting. One question is in regarding to career assessments with the TTI tools and the relevance as far as the EQ. EQ is mainly used for coaching and development. We do have this on our list of tools to validate for the selection process. At this point, people tend to employ interview questions in order to really get an idea of somebody's emotional intelligence during the hiring process, but they don't use the assessment as a pre-hire tool at this time. Okay, and it looks like the same types of questions were about career through the GoToMeeting panels. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to, again, either tweet those with the hashtag TTIEQ or use your GoToMeeting panel. So let's talk about a few different ways that you can put EQ to work in your organization. These are very simple applications of emotional intelligence that really help build a communication and a commonality amongst employees within an organization. And we're going to go through about 4 different slides and some things to keep in mind as you start to utilize this within the corporations you work within. The first one is the emotional temperature. Take your emotional temperature 2 to 3 times a day in the beginning. This is going to be the first step in increasing your self-awareness. And what I recommend is actually setting an alarm on your cell phone, on your computer screen, 2 to 3 times a day that just reminds you to take your emotional temperature. And then journal this information. It's important to do it the same time every day. And not just take your emotional temperature when you start to feel that you're getting, emotionally charged and you may not be making decisions in the best way. You want to take it the same time every day so that you're in different types of moods when you take your emotional temperature. And then that's going to just take you through a practice of saying, okay, it's 2 o'clock. This is how I'm feeling right now. You've journaled it. Journal a couple of statements as to why you're feeling that way. And then you can determine, do you need to use one of your emotional enablers in order to decrease where you are right at the moment? What's kind of happened throughout the day? And look at your events maybe 2 hours prior. And then the events that are coming up 2 hours beyond where you took your emotional temperature. And just see how that might be impacting you either positively or negatively each and every day. That will start to give you an idea of the things that are your enablers versus your disablers. Therefore, you can gravitate more towards the enablers whenever possible and try to minimize those disablers or at least be able to preempt them so that you're able to self-regulate, which would be the next step. We have another question. I have a client with 2 coworkers who are struggling to work well together. Could and would the assessment tool be used to intervene, mediate, and set a course for a stronger, more effective working relationship? Absolutely. Understanding both individuals' EQ, as well as their behaviors and their motivators, would be a great step in increasing that communication and decreasing the conflict. The awareness piece, just as an individual, is so powerful and really increases performance almost instantaneously. You start to understand where you are and how you're perceived by others, and you just instantly want to change that, and you want to improve upon those areas. And then taking both people through the behaviors and the motivators so they understand each other's communication style, and they also understand the motivators behind their actions would be key. When there's an emotional situation that's of a negative nature, you have a stress response. When that happens, these are some of the different physical responses that go on inside the body. Pupils can become dilated, your heart rate can increase, muscle tension, narrowing of your arteries, you have raised blood sugar, you increase your blood pressure, cold and sweaty palms, you may be shaky. And so those are the negative things that start to happen. So this is physiological. It's happening inside of your body. So you can't just say, oh, I'm not going to feel this way anymore. It's not that simple. You need to do things to reduce it and to get yourself to a relaxation response. When you're in a relaxation response and you don't have all those endorphins running through your body from a negative way, you can be more creative, more stable, your muscles are going to relax, even your digestion improves. So it's not only from a productivity standpoint, but from an overall health standpoint, spending most of your time in that relaxation response stage is going to be better for you as well as the organization you work for. Building a language around EQ is key. TTI over the years, we have been famous for our behavioral assessments, and people were able to build a language around it. I'm a high D or a low D or a high S or a low S and so on. Building a language around EQ is very simple as well. We like to use the clear glass to cloudy glass. And you can even say clear glass to red glass. Meaning when you're in that relaxation response that we just showed you on the previous screen, you're really having a clear glass. As you're moving to that stress response, you're moving through to a cloudy glass or even a red glass. We've had some organizations take it all the way to a boiling glass. And so building that language where people are comfortable in an organization to say, you know, my glass isn't clear right now, can we have this conversation later? Is so impactful on an organization, because why have a conversation with somebody who's not ready to look at the situation with an open mind, without bias, and to really find a logical solution? It's pointless to have that conversation. Now, I understand there are scenarios where a decision has to be made and you have to move forward. But understanding that one or more of the parties involved in the discussion are coming to the table with a less than clear glass is important, because you can understand where they are, and they're putting that information out on the table. They're being honest about it, that they don't, really have all their faculties to bring to that discussion. And so you can have a more open dialogue and get to a better solution, even in those severe circumstances. So allowing employees to start to use this type of language when working with each other, and working with their managers and or their subordinates is powerful. It doesn't mean that you've had, a bad personal day. It doesn't mean you've had a bad work day. It doesn't really give an indicator as to why your glass is cloudy or clear. It's simply, my glass is cloudy right now. Most employees, when they go to have a conversation with somebody and somebody says, you know what, my glass is red or my glass is cloudy, the employee who was originally initiating the conversation will turn around and go back to work. Whereas if an employee starts to initiate a conversation and the employee whose glass is cloudy or red starts to tell them what's wrong with them and why they don't want to have the conversation, then you have a negative conversation that's either work-related or not, but regardless, it's not productive, happening. And so it kind of becomes all that water cooler talk that we try to eliminate in organizations. Using the clear glass, cloudy glass allows the employee who's having the bad day just kind of go on about their business without interrupting everybody else, and allows the employee who was originally going to initiate the conversation to turn around and walk away without feeling guilty that they weren't caring enough to find out what was going on with their coworker. And it really eliminates a lot of those non-productive, non-essential conversations that happen in the workplace. So again, I encourage you to build a language that works for your organization as it relates to EQ. This is something that can be done whether you know your EQ scores or not. People know when they're having a bad day, and employing this kind of language can work in that scenario, again, regardless of having an EQ assessment result or not. And I go back to our TTI dimensions of superior performance for this final slide. Again, the emotional intelligence is in the center of our wheel. Okay, you can have people who are matched to a position from a behavior, personal skills, acumen, and motivation standpoint, and still be struggling with hitting their goals and their performance standards. If that's a situation at your place, I strongly encourage you to take a look at their emotional intelligence level. It's amazing with what going through an assessment process and a short debrief can really do for those individuals. And those people who are job matched that are just struggling a little bit, it's very easy to turn the tables on that and allow them to be more productive and to start hitting those goals and to be the person that you originally employed for that position. At this time, I'll open it up for more questions. And I'd also like to invite you, if you'd like some more information, to please contact your TTI Value Added Associate, or if you don't have one, to contact our Business Services department. The number's on the screen there for you. In addition to that, if you would like to sample TTI's EQ assessment, you are welcome to take our Behavioral Intelligence Assessment at the link on your screen. And please feel free to follow us on Twitter at TTI Assessments, at TTI Research, at Ashley I. Bowers, or visit us on the web at ttiassessments.com or ttiresearch.com. We'll stay on the panel here for just a few more minutes to address any additional questions and to allow you to collect the information from the screen for more additional follow-up. All right. Thank you everyone for attending today. We appreciate your time, and this webinar has been recorded, so it will be up on our websites within 24 hours of today's call. And with that, I hope you all have a great and productive week. Thank you.